Hello again. The weather might be miserable outside, but at this time of year we can spend a lot of time planning and it can be quite an exciting time. And after Christmas the days start getting longer, we've got more daylight and we can sort of focus on what's happening. We've got all these perhaps New Year's resolutions or at least New Year's plans and exciting events over the summer. But how do you schedule those events so that you get the most out of yourself and you don't end up exhausted and not enjoying yourself or stale or overtrained? I find that 2 or 3 big events is enough in a year, and that's pretty much the same whether you're training towards a fast, short event or longer events like multi-day events or multi-day bikepacking events. 2 to 3 events a year is a nice level to work to. What I mean by a big event is a big event relative to you. So 100 kilometres might be a big event for one person, whereas the Transcontinental Race, taking a couple of weeks of maybe 15 hours of riding a day, is a big event for somebody else. Well, it's a big event for everybody, isn't it? But you see what I mean, it's what's big for you, what's making that progression for you, is what's challenging you. If you've got a couple of events close together, like certainly one person I'm working with, he's entered a 1,000 kilometre event and he's entered the All Points North race in the UK. And the reason he's done that is because he's not sure if he's going to get an entry for All Points North. But if you want to do both events close together, then you should treat them as one event. So that might be 2 1,000 kilometre events within a short space of time. And obviously you're not going to be able to recover completely between the two. So you train for both, do one, and the first one should be your priority event because you never know what's going to happen in the second one. So if you've got 2 events close together and your second event is the one you want to do the best in, then you should really consider whether it's sensible to do the first one because it's going to compromise your performance in the second one. Hopefully that makes sense. So once you've got your 2 to 3 big events, hopefully they're quite nicely spaced, so there might be one in March or April, one in June, July and one in September sort of time, August, September, and then put them into your calendar. If you're training for London-Edinburgh-London in 2025, then it would be a good idea to this year do a Super Randonneur series. So that's 4 events, 200, 300, 400 and 600 kilometres. But if you're able to do 600 kilometres, then it should be the case that you're probably not having a lot of trouble with the 200. So you would count the 300, 400 and 600 as your biggest events and plan them. And then the 200 you would expect to do as a stepping stone towards your 300 or your 400. So you've got your big 3 events in the calendar. You're going to have to plan some recovery after those, and you're building up your training volume towards those events. And you're going to be working on your strengths and weaknesses in your build up to those, and that's not really the details of the training plan which we've talked about in previous videos, so I won't be covering that here. And to be successful in your big events, you need to learn certain things. So you've got some sort of skills to develop, and you've got some fitness to develop. Is the distance of the event, the duration, the amount of time you're going to have to be spending on your bike or on your feet, the challenge for you? Or is it the speed? Are you limited by how fast you can go, and that's meaning that you can't have enough brakes, or you're struggling to meet a time limit? So there are certain things you've got to learn and certain things you've got to improve both physically and mentally and skills wise, and the best way to work on those I find is to have some sort of practice event. So smaller events that are still challenging, where you learn from your mistakes and build fitness and endurance as you move on to the next stepping stone. So the next thing to do is put these stepping stone events into your calendar, and it might be that you only want to put them in up to your first big event so that you can plan the next stage to your second big event after you've learned from the first phase of your training block or first phase of your year. That's one of the reasons that I'm not a fan of a big plan, a big overall detailed plan. I like to have an overall framework and then learn from each phase and improve the next phase. So what I would do is have the big events in place in the calendar, but then have the stepping stone practice type events up to the first big event. Learn from the big event, learn your strengths and weaknesses from the big event, what went well, what didn't go so well. Learn from your practice events as you're going along, as you're going towards your first big event. And then when you do your next phase of training, you've got to recover, spend more time recovering than you think you might need. It's always better to be on the safe side. And then you can build up to your next event, take the fitness from the stepping stone events, the big event, the recovery, and you build up to be a bit stronger in the next event, and then same again for your final event. Don't be too ambitious in your plans for this year or next year. Take each year as a step towards the next as you build your fitness and do more and more adventurous and exciting things. So for instance, if you wanted to do London-Edinburgh-London in 2025, then you should really be aiming to do a Super Randonneur series this year. By this year I mean in 2024. And then you've got the fitness to take into doing LEL. And that is something that I found when I coached a number of people towards Paris-Brest-Paris. The ones who struggled with PBP were the ones who hadn't managed to do a Super Randonneur the year before. So it's a long-term process building fitness for these super long events. So similarly, if you're training for a long bikepacking event, do some shorter events first. So a good example of that is Jenny Graham. Like Jenny Graham rode around the world and broke the round the world record, self-supported. But before she did that, she'd done some shorter events. And Jenny had built up with events starting with a couple of days or a long one-day ride, then a couple of days, and then longer and longer events until she got to that point that she could sustain a lot of riding day after day, and that's what took her to the long round the world event. So it takes years to build up that endurance fitness, and you should start now if you want to do London-Edinburgh-London in 2025, and also start thinking about the next PBP if that's your next goal. So what we found is doing a Grand Randonneur event, a 1200 kilometre event, in your first year of long distance cycling is very difficult to do. It's not impossible, but it's very difficult. And similarly, doing a 3-week bikepacking event would be quite challenging in the first year of bikepacking. It's better to start with a 2-day event and build things up. Like a really good one actually, if you live in Europe, is around the Netherlands race, which is about 1,000 kilometres fairly flat. Or pick your own and choose your own events and build up that way, which is what I'm doing with my Randonneur Round the Year project, which you might like to see in the other stream of videos. So I hope that's useful. If you've got any questions, get in touch, make a comment, and I answer all the comments, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.